"This was the temple of the old ones," she said. "Look, you can see the channels for the blood along the sides of the altar, and the rains of 10,000 years have not washed the dark stains from them. The walls have all fallen away, but this stone block defies time and the elements." "But who were these old ones?" demanded Conan. She spread her slim hands helplessly. "Not even in Legendary is this city mentioned." When one picks up a book from Howard's and reads the tales of Kull or Conan the Cimmerian, as he faces monstrosities that somehow survive eons, hiding in the dark and deep parts of the earth, one might recognize something very familiar they felt when reading the tales of another author about similar unfathomable entities. Yes, the vibe and feeling of those creatures feel the same, and not without any reason. In this video, we are exploring how, in theory, Conan could have met CTHULHU the Great and walked the same ground as Randolph Carter as he was exploring ancient ruins, long forgotten even before the sinking of Atlantis at the end of the Arthurian Age. In Howard's The Children of the Night story, we read about a group of academics in a study, having a discussion about various subjects such as evolution, races, and the type and ancestry of people. One of them, a man named Clements, says this. "This is in strictest confidence, you understand? But my roommate talked in his sleep. I began to listen and put his disjointed mumbling together. And in his mutterings, I first heard of the ancient cult hinted at by von Junst, of the king who rules the Dark Empire, which was a revival of an older, darker empire dating back into the Stone Age, and of the great nameless cavern where stands the Dark Man, the image of Bran Mak Morn, carved in his likeness by a master hand while the great king yet lived, and to which each worshipper of Bran makes a pilgrimage once in his or her lifetime. Yes, that cult lives today in the descendants of Bran's people, a silent, unknown current. It flows on in the great ocean of life, waiting for the stone image of the great Bran to breathe and move with sudden life and come from the great cavern to rebuild their lost empire. Indeed, it is the same Bran Mak Morn that appears in the story Worms of the Earth who fights the Roman Empire in his native land of Scotland. Bran embarks on a mission in order to defend his ancient land from the invading Romans, forming an unholy alliance with creatures dwelling hidden in the deep. Does it ring a bell? It certainly should. Bran seeks the advice of a witch, a hybrid of the worms and the humans. After some not YouTube-friendly bargain between the two, Bran sets off to steal something to gain leverage on the worms, an item that the worms worship. The item is called the Black Stone. When hearing this phrase, it certainly sounds familiar. Although the Picts fighting the Roman Empire live much later than Conan, he is of the same world. Also, he is a direct descendant of the legendary Atlantean king, Kull. Kull was in fact an ancestor of Conan himself too. A bit earlier in the same book, as the scholars continue their discussion, their conversation topic starts to orbit around something familiar: forbidden knowledge. At this part, it is becoming obvious that these scholars and professors could well in fact visit or even teach or study at the Miskatonic University in New England, well known from the works of Lovecraft. The following quote appears: "Men may stumble upon secret things, but von Junst dipped deep into forbidden mysteries. He was one of the few men, for instance, who could read the Necronomicon in the original Greek translation." Necronomicon, the book of ancient and forbidden knowledge written by Alhazred himself. And there we have our first link connecting the cosmic horrors haunting people in the 1920s and 30s, were well in fact doing the same with the people of the Hyborian Age, and probably long before. That is a very obvious proof of the connection between the world of Conan and CTHULHU, but there is more. As we progress in the story, we stumble upon more direct evidence. Taverl shrugged his shoulders, and Professor Kirawan, though he snorted and puffed viciously at his pipe, made no direct reply, for he, as well as Conrad, had delved into the Latin version of the book, and had found there things not even a cold-blooded scientist could answer or refute. "Well," he said presently, Suppose we admit the former existence of cults revolving about such nameless and ghastly gods and entities as CTHULHU the Great, Yog-Sothoth, Tsathoggua, Golgoroth, and the like. I cannot find it in my mind to believe that survivals of such cults lurk in the dark corners of the world today. We can ask questions, such if the great wizards and magicians of Conan's age could somehow summon these entities, form alliances with them, or if any of the well-known monsters lurking in the deep and causing nightmares for those who are sensitive in our age happen to meet with Conan? Well, the answer is maybe. The monsters Conan meets are often very Lovecraftian in their appearance and repulsiveness. When Conan and Natalia, as sole survivors of the army of Prince Almeric which swept through the lands of Shem and the wilderness of Stygia, stumble upon a city in the desert called CTHULHU. In the city, Conan has to fight the demon god dwelling there, described from the point of view of Natalia. She saw a giant, toad-like face, the features of which were dim and unstable as those of a specter seen in a mirror of nightmare, great pools of light that might have been eyes blinked at her, and she shook at the cosmic lust reflected there. Only the blinking, toad-like face stood out with any distinctness. The thing was a blur into the sight, a black blot of shadow that normal radiance would neither dissipate nor illuminate. It towered above him like a clinging black cloud. It seemed to flow about him. His madly slashing saber sheared through it again and again. His ripping poignard tore and rent it. He was deluged with a slimy liquid that must have been its sluggish blood, yet its fury was no wise abated. These descriptions reveal that although it is never explicitly identified as either a frog-like servant of the outer gods or a Shoggoth, its appearance shares a remarkable resemblance to both, indistinct, shapeless, and dark in color. Important to mention that this creature was able to wound Conan so severely that he was close to death, something to note as the mighty warrior usually defeats his foes with ease. Not so easy when it comes to the servants of the Old Ones. Similar resemblances can also be observed in other instances. Probably the most direct evidence of an encounter between Conan and a Lovecraftian entity appears in the story of the Devil in Iron. The villain is CTHULHU, a super being with an Achilles heel, which Conan discovers only in the nick of time. He was seeing the transmutation of the being men called CTHULHU, which crawled up from night and the abyss ages ago to clothe itself in the substance of the material universe. He became a blasphemy against all nature, for he had never known the pulse and stir of animate being. Strange and grisly were his servants, called from the dark corners of the planet where grim survivals of forgotten ages yet lurked. His house in Dagon was connected with every other house by tunnels through which his shaven-headed priests bore victims for sacrifice. First, the Necronomicon, Blackstone, and CTHULHU the Great, now blasphemy against nature, dark corners of the planet where remnants of forgotten ages lurked, and finally, the name Dagon, all too familiar. I try to approach this subject as everything within universe boundaries, which of course has its limitation when it comes to a not too coherent story. Nevertheless, the evidence clearly shows remarkable similarities between the cosmic horrors and the creatures Conan has to face during his adventures. So can we say that the creatures Conan met were in fact Lovecraftian? I believe yes, we can. The appearance of the Necronomicon, Dagon, and CTHULHU in the discussion of the past century academics clearly shows that there's a connection. There are other creatures that vaguely resemble Lovecraftian entities. A captive godly being in the Tower of the Elephant, for example, describes his people as traveling through space. We swept through space on mighty wings that drove us through the cosmos quicker than light, but we could never return, for on Earth our wings withered from our shoulders. A description that might apply equally to Lovecraft's description of similar beings. The things come from another planet, being able to live in interstellar space and fly through it on clumsy, powerful wings which have a way of resisting the ether, but which are too poor at steering to be of much use in helping them about on Earth. Could these descriptions be coincidences? Of course they could. In the world of magic, like the world of Conan, monsters are not rare at all. However, it is the language, the descriptions that could ring a bell in our heads. And the more we think about it, the more obvious the idea becomes that eons before the events in Innsmouth, The broad-shouldered Cimmerian roamed the same earth, and with determination in his eyes, faced the same horrors without fear. That causes the modern, civilized man to shiver in his uncontrollable dread.